The 2-1. Lindor towards right center field. This one is back. It is gone! Grand slam! And Lindor puts the Mets on top. The biggest swing of the season for New York.
3-second differential. Shot clock, game clock. Shot clock down to 5. Here's Towns from 3. It's good! Carl Anthony Towns with the dagger. 3-point field goal.
Knicks regain their composure. Towns, deep 3-ball with the sweep.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome to another special live with your boy David, aka Top Bunk. Welcome to another live of the Top Bunk Sports Podcast, man. And I cannot be more honored than to have a special friend here on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome my guy, CP. What is going on, CP?
My guy, I appreciate you letting me come on the channel. It's an honor to be the first guest. You got some great stuff going on, and I could not help but just bob my head with that intro, man. It was fire, bro. It was fire. So yeah, man, I'm happy to be here. I appreciate you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it, man. A lot of things have been going on in the sports world. I mean, we obviously got our boys in Manhattan heating up, and then we got our boys in Queens. Our front office making big moves, being aggressive. But I want to start with the boys in Manhattan. The New York Knicks have been on fire ever since they traded for Karl Anthony Towns. A lot of big impact moves during the offseason. Leon Rose, I mean, you remember back in 2021, they were testing his gangster. They were saying that he wasn't that guy. He was never going to get a real point guard in here, that he was never going to get a star here after the whole thing happened with KD and Kyrie. And it just seems like now the fan has kind of made a full turnaround and kind of have this mantra of in Leon we trust. What have you, in terms of being a fan, you take away the Karl Anthony Towns thing for a second. What have you been impressed with since Leon Rose, joined the front office?
It's been methodical, man. I think that's the one thing that I'll say, and I'm just impressed with the phase. It just seems like he had a phased out plan since he came into this organization. The building blocks of where the Knicks are today is, or was RJ Barrett and Julius Randle kind of leading the way there. And obviously, the pieces surrounding them. And, now you come full circle. None of those guys are here. It's a complete roster turnover. Mikal Bridges, in the offseason. Josh Hart coming over at the trade deadline when he did. I mean, everyone basically outside of Mitch Robinson, and I'm sure we'll talk about Mitchell Robinson coming back here in just a second as we segue there. But it seemed very methodical. And there's a lot of, I would say, ballsy moves that Leon Rose always seems to make. And the thing is that if there's one thing that anybody should know about, at least the way that I talk about the New York Knicks is that, yeah, you're never ever going to always agree with Leon Rose on any given move, right? Like we like some of his moves. For me, I think it was a little risky when the Karl Anthony Towns trade went down, seeing what the Knicks gave up. And I wasn't doubting the caliber of a player that Karl Anthony Towns is, but I was just like, Julius and Dante, that's a little bit crazy. But again, I was wrong, and I'm going to sit here and tell you that I was wrong because now we see in full force what Karl Anthony Towns means to this team alongside Jalen Brunson. We see the differential in the style of basketball that they play. I think that Leon Rose, first and foremost, knows his personnel, and he knows the guys that he needs to get, and he got them in Brunson and Cat, but he also knows who he needs to put around them. And I think that's the most important thing. And again, like you said, man, in Leon, we trust 100%.
I think it was one of those things where he took a ballsy move with signing Randall. I mean, if you remember the energy during Knicks Twitter and just a vibe around, like they were like Randall, like, you know what I'm saying? Because of the constant rumor of, oh, the Knicks were going to get Kevin Durant. They opened up money to get 2 max superstars in there. And Julius Randle was that option. Now, obviously, with the Nets making the playoffs prior with D'Angelo Russell and Spencer Dinwiddie, that kind of put Brooklyn on a good pedestal, because that team wasn't supposed they were supposed to tank, and they completely passed expectations. So they made the
Right.
playoffs, and obviously they ended up picking up Kyrie and KD, and it's like, okay, so I guess the Knicks never wanted to be here, or the Knicks never really made a full push for it. And then the comments with James Dolan talking about how he didn't want to give Kevin Durant a super max because of the injury history and stuff like that. So it was kind of one of those times where you're like, the same old bull crap with the Knicks, and then Randall coming here. I would honestly, CP, if you would have told me after the 2019 season, if Julius Randle would have made that huge turnaround, I would have laughed in your face. I would have been like, hell no. Just because he's never been a star player. You look at his days in the Lakers, he was never the star. You look at his time in New Orleans, he was never the star. Like, it was Anthony Davis. And if you remember in his interviews, he's always said, like, once I knew Anthony Davis was out the door, I had to leave. Like, there was no way I was going to stay there, because then they were going to bring Zion, and what was I going to do? You know what I'm saying? So he had to go somewhere where he kind of had a leverage in a way where he felt comfortable. And I never expected that turnaround to happen. I will always be thankful for what Julius Randle has done for this organization. I don't care what you say. I don't care what people, the grudge that they have against him. He was a culture change within this organization. He took everything on his back. Yes, he had some unfortunate, mishaps with the fans and stuff like that. I get it. But at the same time, this is a guy that came into this organization and never experienced being a star. Never had to deal with stuff like Carmelo Anthony. Melo went from one star in Denver to being a star in New York, so he kind of had that experience. Julius Randle never had that. He was second, third guy on the team before fully taking over the Knicks, and he was a culture change. Him and RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickly, you know what I mean? Guys like that were able to really shift his organization to what it is now. So when it comes down to that trade, I was upset about the giving up Dante. But kind of going into it, you kind of knew that, listen, Minnesota always wanted Dante. I mean, Dante even said himself, Minnesota was number two. If it wasn't for the Knicks, Minnesota was number two. So it was always a mix there between them two. And they wanted Dante, and they were like, listen, we're not going to pay Karl Anthony Towns his contract. We're not going to go, we have to, it's either Anthony Edwards or it's Karl Anthony Towns. And they obviously stuck with Anthony Edwards, which I would too. Anthony Edwards, I think, is the best player in the league right now, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
So they obviously moved Karl Anthony Towns, and it's funny because I would have never thought that he would have came to the Knicks. I thought if they were going to move him, they were going to move him somewhere where they would have got a deeper package for him, because Cat's still in his prime. Like he's the best shooting big man in the league. Like, you can't, if I'm gonna trade that guy who again was one of the reasons why I made the Western Conference Finals the year prior, I'm gonna get a haul, especially after I had to give up a lot to get Rudy Gobert. Like, I'm gonna get a haul back. So for them to go ahead and trade with the Knicks, especially if the Knicks been in so much trade rumors to want Karl Anthony Towns here, and they never really exercised it up until now, I think it was one of those moves where I was like, okay, we gave up Dante, but the way Cat's been taking off, man, it almost feels like he gelled with them quickly. Like, everything just happened all at once. What do you think about the chemistry issues between him and, obviously it's kind of brewing now, but when he first came in here, you kind of saw that him and Jalen Brunson really weren't mixing well. Like, the chemistry wasn't there. What do you think about that? How do you think that leads into the second half of the season, where we're trying to make that push for the playoffs?
Absolutely. And yeah, I first and foremost, the first couple of games this season when things weren't going so hot, I was kind of the one pressing the panic button a little bit. And it wasn't because of the chemistry issues. I was never worried about that, right? We all
Right.
know why Cat, uh, was brought onto this team, and why Julius Randle was given up in exchange, as well as Dante, for Karl Anthony Towns, was to play that two-man game of 4 out, 1 in, or even at sometimes a 5 out set with Karl Anthony Towns, a guy that's a 7-footer, but can shoot the lights out of the gym, right? That's why he was brought in here alongside Jalen Brunson. It was never an issue or a question that the chemistry was going to be just that and what it is right now. Because that's another beautiful aspect about the way that Leon Rose moves, is that he also takes that into consideration, right? The locker room, the chemistry of the team, and the guys that just vibe with each other, right? And are gelling with each other. And that's something that he's prioritized, especially with a move like this, 100%. I have no doubt about that in my mind. But what I will say, the biggest issue was for me was understanding and trying to get over the hurdle of the lack of size that you gave up at that point. Because, Karl Anthony Towns, he has the ability and has showed the ability to play bully ball, right? But that wasn't really what his game was when I was watching him out in Minnesota, as much as a Julius Randle's game was, right? In a Knicks
Right.
uniform. That's what
Mhm.
I was kind of concerned about. And I'm still kind of concerned about it, to be honest with you, because I think at some point it could catch up to the New York Knicks with and against bigger teams, lengthier
Mhm.
teams. I think that Precious Achua and his presence coming in and being that option helps that out a lot. But again,
Yeah.
there's only so much Precious Achua can do being an undersized power forward, 6'8", 6'9". You're going to need another either co-center, and this is where we could talk about Mitchell Robinson coming in either starting or being
Right.
that viable backup option and providing you that relief when Karl Anthony Towns isn't on the floor to continue to work the glass offensively and defensively on that board. Because I will say, the last 3 games that we've seen have been absolute masterful performances by the New York Knicks, right? On a 3-game winning streak going into tonight against Toronto. But that game against the Hawks at home really bothered me, bro. It really bothered me. And I'm talking about a possession and multiple possessions for the Hawks where they were just outworking the New York Knicks.
In that
The
second half,
guard
right?
in that
That second
second
half
half,
right there. Yep.
and
Hmm.
there was one possession that they got where they got 4 or 5 offensive rebounds in a row. And I said, dude, these guys look tired and they looked outmatched against the Hawks team that is kind of on the on the come up, right? In terms of trying to rebuild their presence, especially post Dejounte Murray. But again, a team that realistically the Knicks should be beating 9 times out of 10 and not losing 2 in a row to so far this season. So that bothered me. But again, it's kind of like the consistency as well. I'm waiting to see over the long haul if this Knicks team, without a Mitchell Robinson on the floor, without another big man that they could be maybe pursuing via the trade deadline, if they can sustain that. Because Josh Hart, again, great rebounder. We know what he can do. He showed his rebounding capabilities. I mean, throughout his career, but definitely in the tail end of last season and especially early on this season. But an undersized 6'4", 6'5", small forward / power forward. I need guys that have a lot of like wingspan length and
Right.
tallness,
Right.
right? In
Right.
terms of trying to grab those boards offensively and defensively alongside Cat. And I think that combo between Gobert and Cat was nice. But again, there's something to be said about, is that going to hinder Cat's game if you move him to the 4? And I do see that point of things as well.
Right. I think too, it's a lot of people are not realizing that you had a system for Anthony Edwards that you just kind of took away.
Yeah.
Again, fans like to bring up the fact that they weren't going to pay Karl Anthony Towns, but then it's kind of like, if you have to overspend and kind of pay him, you have to take that leap. Look how unorganized that Timberwolves team looks right now. Julius Randle. The thing with Julius Randle is you're also taking a guy that everything was ran through him. It was ran through him and Brunson. So it's kind of like now he has to play a little bit of, he has to sit back a little bit and understand that the offense is ran through Anthony Edwards. It's ran for, him and Mike Conley. I mean, you look at the game against the Knicks, right? Where we blew them out. If you watch that first quarter, they were just trying to give everything around. They were trying to do everything around Randall. And it
Yep.
just, he caught fire. But once they started noticing that, they shut him down. You saw Randall got cold easily, and he was nowhere to be found. So it's one of those things where you had to. I mean, he was attacking Precious Achua in the beginning. Precious Achua could not hold him down. All Tibbs had to do was tell OG Anunoby, switch that. You didn't see Randall for the rest of the game, and they took advantage of that. They were so out of whack that even Anthony Edwards is like, yo, I can't even score. I can't get to my spots. Like, they were just so out of whack. And I've been watching, just for the support of Randall, I've been watching a lot of Timberwolves games. They don't have chemistry because
Yeah.
you have one offensive player that, yeah, he can facilitate, but Anthony Edwards is going to get his 25 plus every night. That you're not gonna deny that. Also, Randall's trying to do that. Randall, unless it was last year, Randall does not play off ball really well. He needs to score the basket. He needs to score the basketball at all times. When he does not score the basketball, his body language is off. He gets upset. He doesn't play within the team. That's his issue, and that's why a lot of Timberwolves fans are freaking out, because they're like, dude, what is this dude doing? He doesn't get back on defense. He's not running back to cover man. Whenever he tries to, he doesn't fight for an offensive rebound. What are we gonna do? And I always, I've been in conversations with Timberwolves fans on Twitter. I've always told them, like, listen, you guys got him on his last year. You guys don't have to resign him. Like, that's the thing. You guys could go into this offseason just knowing that, if they're gonna continue to add something, they're adding around Rudy Gobert and Anthony Edwards.
Right.
My question that I wanted to ask you was, do you think Karl-Anthony Towns gelled really well just based off the fact that he's home? Or do you think there was a system under Tibbs that he's known for so long that he was like, nah, I feel comfortable? Because it seemed like even though he was succeeding with Chris Finch, when it came playoff time, it seemed like Chris Finch really had him. He wasn't comfortable. Like even towards the second half of the season, you could tell there were some times where he couldn't really get any rhythm, and Anthony Edwards really kind of had to put him in that way. Do you think that the system between Chris Finch and Tibbs it plays a major role?
Well, I think so 100%. And I just want to say that was an absolutely excellent point by you talking about off-ball movement, because that's why the Knicks are so dangerous right now, and that's the advantage that you get with moving off and from Julius Randle, was that off-ball movement. All 5 guys on the Knicks right now at any given moment can move off ball very efficiently. That's something that Dante DiVincenzo does very well, and that's why he succeeded on the Knicks last season, and that's why he's having a little bit of an issue in Minnesota right now, because they're trying to convert him into something that he's simply not, from the way that I've seen it, right? So that's a beautiful point. And I do think it's a little bit of both, to be honest with you, in terms of the familiarity. In terms of Cat and Tibbs, they had a little bit of their own issues, right? When Cat first got into the league, there was some, I guess, I don't even know how you would say it, but there was some, I guess, butting of heads, I guess was what you would say, between the two guys.
Right.
And Karl-Anthony Towns was very adamant that those two have quickly squashed that, and that's something that hasn't lingered. So having that already familiar aspect of the system that Tibbs has deployed is fantastic. Karl-Anthony Towns has really seemed to buy into, we know how great he is offensively, but can he work extra on the defensive side of the ball, especially, right, knowing that you're not going to have that safety blanket of a guy like Gobert to sort of protect your weaknesses and make you seem a little bit more competent than you actually are defensively and rebounding. And he's done a tremendous job at adjusting to that. But I also think that, the Knicks are a very loose group, man. And I think that to a lot of fans, it's easy to see, but I think that it's also easy to overlook that. Like, that actually means something in terms of the locker room presence that you establish. We talk about this all the time with the Mets and, the guys, vibing with each other, and how great 2024 was. It looked like the clubhouse was a lot tighter, potentially, right, that we know of, than they were, especially in 2023. And take a look at the comparisons between the two. Same thing could be said for the locker room. I mean, you got the Roommates podcast, you got those two guys, but it just seems like Karl-Anthony Towns, in addition to him being from the area, right, the New Jersey, New York area, that's already a given in terms of the motivation factor, I think. But do we really think it's a challenge to get along with those guys right there, the Nova boys, and also everybody else? Precious Achiuwa seems to have bought into that aspect as well. He could have probably signed elsewhere for a little bit more, but he chose to come back to the Knicks, and that's saying something, right? The Knicks are not only establishing being a presence on the court, but guys have to actually want to buy in and be a part of that locker room too, because you can be talented on the court, but I think locker room issues, from what the fans see, it's a whole different story. And it seems like the Knicks are not going to deal with that at all. They haven't been dealing with it, and they won't for quite some time, especially if you keep this core nucleus of guys together. So I get that it's kind of like a cliche, maybe a little bit of a cheesy topic, but I do think it goes a lot further in terms of importance than what most fans would want to sort of take stock into, I think.
Got it. Well, shout out to the 60 that is in here. Appreciate you guys, man. I want to bring up a comment. Shout out to my guy AP from Queens Baseball. He's also my co-host on the 7 Express podcast. So make sure y'all check that out, man. He says right here, the Knicks need another big man that can rebound, play defense, and not be a liability on the offensive side. Will be hard to trade for anyone like that because we gave up a lot of our trade capital. I will say this, CP, excuse me. I believe that they could have gotten a guy within that and still gave some of their trade capital with Walker Kessler. I felt like they were in a good position to get a Walker Kessler who is not only great defensively, but has a post up move, can protect the perimeter in a very good way, and can grab you a lot of rebounds. The thing where I think see Josh Hart and Precious Achua, they succeed in this. Mitchell Robinson and Jericho Sims don't. If you're not getting boards or if they're not catching lobs, there's no use for a Mitchell Robinson. Or if you're not getting defensive blocks, there's no use for a Mitchell Robinson or a Jericho Sims. And this is, I've always preached, CP, that if Jericho Sims and Mitchell Robinson don't add a post game to their own game, it's a problem. It's a big problem, especially for two guys that are always hurt one way or the other. Well, Mitch more, but he's always hurt one way or the other. You're always sitting to yourself like, yo, when is this guy ever gonna have a full healthy season? Like you just don't know because he's always hurt. So Walker Kessler would have been a big pickup for me just because of,
Yeah.
like I said, he has not only a defensive game, but his post game works really well. Especially in the Utah system. I know they're still trying to build, but if you just watch a couple of their games, the way they feed him the ball, he's able to get to the basket whenever he wants. He's a big guy. How do you think when Mitch comes back? How do you think it's going to affect the team, and how do you think Tibbs is going to utilize them when Cat is kind of succeeding right now in that fit spot?
Yeah, so this is something that I've gone back and forth on, and I do like, Walker Kessler a lot for all the reasons that you literally just said. And I think even Nick Richards, I mean, he doesn't have as high of an upside as Walker Kessler in terms of like the offensive game, but he does
Yeah,
fit that mold a lot more so than a
right.
guy like Mitchell Robinson. The one problem the Knicks are going to have um, is offloading Mitch's contract in terms of just trying to get somebody to take that on. It's a team friendly contract, right? If he actually stayed on the court. And that's
Mhm.
what most teams probably aren't going to really want to take on that risk without the Knicks, taking on some money or however that works out. So I do think that Mitchell Robinson's trade market is going to be limited. Um, Again, talented guy, but he just hasn't added that post presence, like you said. That is one thing. That and free throws. If he added a little bit of a
Yeah,
mid range,
yeah,
not
yeah,
even a extensive or vast mid range.
yeah.
If he added just a little bit of a shot in the free throws, man, he would be a fantastic center option, and the Knicks would have just a ton of teams calling for him, even with the injury concerns. But I do think that you are going to risk some offensive efficiency with Mitchell Robinson on the floor if you were able to, and if you're thinking about plugging him in as the starting center alongside Cat and moving Cat to the four. And is that something that the New York Knicks are going to risk right now? I don't really think so. 2 weeks ago, before the Knicks really started to get, I guess, in their zone and hot and play like an actual unit and, just everything that they got going on right now, the way they're looking right now, I would have said, yeah, it's a no doubt or no brainer. You got to go ahead and put Mitch into the starting center role, and you got to just eat those boards up because that's the only way you're going to accomplish that if you don't go out and trade for somebody. But now I'm kind of like, and this is the thing with the Knicks, right? Is the consistency that I'm still waiting to see because my answer has changed over the course of the first 28 games, 29 games that we're in right now. And
Right.
that's something that's fluid, right? There's not a one
Right.
size fits all. It's always fluid. So it's not a problem of having one take and then moving it to the next based off how they're playing because that's sports, man. It's basketball, right? Things are going to be changing, with the snap of a finger, just like that. So yeah, 100%. I do think that Mitchell Robinson is in line. I don't see a trade market for him at the moment. It'd be great and no disrespect to Mitch, but if the Knicks were able to offload him and go into a little bit of a safer route, a safer option, I think that'd be awesome. But I think right now you got to plug him in as the backup center, and then you got to find out what works offensively for the second unit, because I don't think that you can risk at this moment with the way that Brunson is cooking, with the way that Cat is cooking right now. You can't risk that sort of flow of the game from what I'm seeing right now. But again, I mean, maybe we see something totally different tonight and I change my opinion tomorrow. But now I'm just playing with you. Yeah, I think the backup center role is gonna be perfect for Mitch, to be honest, when he's back.
I'm looking at I got two more questions on the Knicks, but I'm looking at your background. I see you got the Rangers and you got the Giants. You understand the level of depression that I'm going through right now with those two teams, bro?
Man, dude, I know it all too well at this point. So the Mets and the Knicks are the saving grace when it comes to that, man.
Do you
That's a
think they'll
two
get Shador in the
terrible
draft?
teams.
You think
What was that?
they'll get Shador, Shador at Deion Sanders' son in the draft since we're
I
number one
mean,
right now?
whether they think that he's a fit or not, I don't know. I think they got to go QB. There's no chance you can't go QB at this point. You
Yeah,
got Cam Ward too. I know there's
that's the
some
one I want.
Giants. I
That's
was
the
gonna
one I
say,
want. Yeah,
I was gonna say
yeah,
Cam Ward's probably the better option if I'm actually
yeah.
assessing it. Um, without the actual name attached. I mean, I'm not saying Shadur Sanders is not talented at all, but I think fit wise, and I think that if I was to go with one or the other, I'm definitely going Cam Ward. But you know,
Yeah.
at this point, with the way that the QB situation has been for the last couple of seasons, yeah, man, just get me a QB. I don't care what his name
That's
is.
it. That's it. It would be great to finally have this organization go, yeah, let's get a black quarterback in here and let's build with a black quarterback in here for once, please. Nobody's able gonna be another Eli Manning. That's it. That's it. Leave that brother where he's at and just get a black quarterback in here and just build. You have neighbors in here, like Malik Neighbors, for God's sakes. Like
Absolutely.
they're making that brother.
Absolutely.
If you watch Malik Neighbors post games, he looks like he wants to cry. Like he just wants to kill himself. Like it's
And
so bad.
that's something that I was fearing too going into the season with Daniel Jones. I'm like, dude, like Malik Neighbors is awesome, but like the one question, the one obvious was who's going to throw him the ball, because
Right, right.
DJ was never that. You know what I'm saying? Especially with what we saw last season. So yeah, I agree, man. It's time for a total makeover at the helm. And the one position that really matters, man, the QBs make a difference. So I agree. Cam Ward, Shadur Sanders, sign me up. I don't care at this point, but 1-1's got to be a QB. There's
Yeah,
no way. And I know that there's gonna be some Giants fans out there saying, oh, well, I don't like either of these guys. Trade back, miss me with that. You take one of them, whether Joe Shane is here or not. I don't care who the GM is next season. I don't care. The pick's got to be a QB. Enough
right.
said.
Yeah,
Give me Cam Ward personally, but if it
yeah,
should, I'm not
yeah.
going to complain, man.
You think Dable stays?
Man,
Probably not, right?
I've been hard on Dable a lot. Some of the fundamental stuff with the Giants this season seems like it could come down to the head coach. So if the if the Giants are going to be moving off of Shane, just as they came in, I'd make it a package. They leave. So if Shane is gone, I think Dayball's
Dable's gone.
gone too.
I
Yeah.
like I like Dable. I never had an issue with him. I think where they placed him, it's probably why it looks bad. I think with the pieces that they gave him, it's not his fault.
Right.
And I also think that as much as I did appreciate that 2022 season, I think that's what messed us up, is that we were still in a position to keep tanking and still add, and we ended up making the playoffs, and we just didn't know how to add to that. So,
We
it's
overachieved and it came
over.
back to bite us, is what I always say.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Listen, CP, if you would have spoken to me when we offered Daniel Jones that contract, oh my God, CP, you would have seen me I would have lost my mind, bro. I was flipping out, bro. I've never lost my mind so much like I did that day when they off, because I'm like, how do you pass over Saquon Barkley? Like, I
Facts.
get it. The notion that running backs are not supposed to be getting paid high contracts, end that. You be the New York Giants and dismiss that claim. Give him his money. And now you're seeing what he's doing with the Eagles. And it's like, out of all teams, you guys let him walk to the Eagles? Are you kidding me? Are you like, come on, dude? Like,
Giants got a lot of problems, man. It's going to take a couple years to figure it out. That's what I've kind of accepted, and that's why I'm like I'm locked into them, right? I'm locked into the Giants
right,
because I'm a diehard fan. I'm never just gonna give up because things get tough, right? This is
right.
sports fandom, like it's how it works. But I'll tell you, especially with the way the Rangers are going right now, too, the Mets and the Knicks, man, they got to have our backs at this point.
I agree. I agree. I'm on high I'm on high heels with those two. The two more Knicks questions, and then we'll get over to the Knicks. The first one is: do you see the Knicks making an impactful trade at the trade deadline? And what's your prediction in terms of obviously win, and obviously I know who you're gonna choose, but win and exact score for tonight's game?
Okay, impactful move. I mean, I've heard some smoke about Jordan Clarkson. I've heard some smoke about Jordan Clarkson. I think that the reports are out there on X. It's public information. I'm not an insider. I won't claim to be, but Jordan Clarkson. That's a guy that I was kind of eyeing last season at the trade deadline, and it was he was one of the less favorable options for me, and I'm kind of glad it didn't go down that route last season. But I think that it makes a little bit more sense with what the Knicks need. This season, especially with Tyler Kolek not being able to make that immediate impact. I don't think that was ever a realistic opportunity for him to do so under Tibbs. I mean, how long did it take for IQ to get that sort of respect from Tibbs? Same thing with Deuce McBride. And Deuce McBride is an awesome option off the bench, but I really do and have thought that he was more of a shooting guard, right? Especially with what he's been doing in his play style, especially with that shot, off the dribble. And just the catch and shoot with him too. I mean, he shoots the ball very well, but I just don't think that he's that guy to be commanding the second unit with the ball in his hands at all times. I mean, I'm not saying Jordan Clarkson is that too, and I haven't really taken a look at what the trade, I guess, avenue and the landscape is for the New York Knicks as much as I've been locked into what the Mets are doing so far this offseason. But I
Right,
think that
right.
Jordan Clarkson could make some sense. And I do think, I just think that relying on Mitchell Robinson, this is going back to the Mitchell Robinson talking point. I think that if the Knicks are going to rely on him to be that guy and forego adding any other big man options at the trade deadline, that would be an absolute mistake. Because again, as much as I like Mitch, as great as a fit for him being the backup center would be behind Karl-Anthony Towns, simply relying on him is just a huge risk, especially when you have championship caliber aspirations. And that's something that I didn't mention before is that Leon Rose, what adds to the ballsiness of that move for Cat is that you're telling the league, right? The Celtics, the Sixers, whoever else, the Heat, that the Knicks are here right now. We're not waiting another season. This is not well, if we don't reach the finals for another season, we'll be happy with the Eastern Conference Finals appearance. No. This is
Yeah,
championship or bust, and we're
yeah,
creating this window of 3, 4, 5 years with the extensions already given and ones that they are presumably going to have to hand out. That this is championship or bust right now. So, 100%. That's what I also like about Leon Rose, because again, he puts all of his cards on the table when he
yeah,
thinks it's
yeah.
time to do so. But final score tonight and prediction, obviously, I think the Knicks win. I'll see if RJ Barrett's playing today. I know he had a fantastic
They
game
said he
against
was
the Knicks.
questionable
It's
today.
questionable, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's going to have a huge impact. I think Scotty Barnes got hurt in that game too, the last go
He
around
did. He did.
for the Raptors.
Yeah.
I didn't get to watch that game fully, so I was kind of watching the highlights of that game. I wish I was, because I wanted to see RJ, versus the Knicks and see how he seemed a
He
little
was
energized,
cooking.
a little
He
fired
was
up. You know what I
cooking.
mean?
Yeah, he went
Exactly.
off. He again, another situation where you're playing against your former team that traded you. He seemed like they couldn't stop him. He got to his left like throughout the entire game, and they just couldn't stop him. Up until probably maybe I'll say like 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, when he started going to his left even more, and it finally clicked for the Knicks. Like, yo, make him go to his right, because he's always going to his left and he's scoring. So then once they stopped that, they ended up getting to offensive rhythm, and then you saw Cat just go off. So yeah,
As
I'm expecting the same thing.
The New York,
Yeah,
that's what it
yeah,
was there.
yeah.
But
I'm
yeah,
expecting the
final
same thing.
score final score tonight. I think it's going to be Knicks win. Let me just throw out dude, I don't know, man. I would say 110, 110, 103. Let's go 110,
Okay,
103.
that's a high
Maybe I'm the
scoring game.
lottery winner.
Okay, yeah. Put that on the slate today. You should go on FanDuel and put that in. See if you win some money out of that. But yeah, man. Yeah, everybody check in the Knicks and Raptors at 7:30 on MSG, man. It should be another dub. And man, we're getting close, man. The season is flying by, and by the time we'll get to All-Star break, and then we ain't got to worry about nothing else but making that run for the playoffs. So I'm excited. Knicks are third seed right now. They don't look like they're dropping out of that third seed. It's gonna be fun, man, because I think this is a time where, with all the critics saying that Karl Anthony Towns is not a good playoff performer, I think now that he's under a system with Tibbs that he knows, and he's playing with guys that he's comfortable. And you're seeing a different cat. I don't think the Timberwolves have seen a top 5 MVP conversation type of player in Cat. Like, we're seeing a total different guy who is scoring the basket, who's driving to the basket really well, shooting the three at a phenomenal rate, and he's playing well off ball. Like, he's sharing the rock. He's getting guys in different spots, making incredible passes. His playmaking is exceptional this year. So I think if that continues into the playoffs, we might be seeing a run for the Celtics and the Cavs money. Everybody keeps saying that we're not better than the Celtics, but I'm like, listen, we don't play the Celtics until February, until March or February. They haven't seen this Knicks team like this.
Right.
So this is a whole different type of team that they might be playing into. They remember in 2013 when we beat the Celtics in the playoffs, they were already counting us out before that series even started. Carmelo Anthony was going to get double teamed. We didn't have enough shoot. And what happened? They let Melo go off. They weren't double teaming him. You had shooters like Jason Kidd, Raymond Felton that were going. Well, Raymond Felton, I think, was hurt, but they did it without like J.R. Smith being in there. J.R. Smith was suspended. J.R. Smith really didn't play that much. They were able to figure it out. So I think with this Celtics team, we're a whole different team in terms of the Knicks that you saw on opening day. That when we play the Celtics team again and this Cavs team, it's going to be a little bit better because now the chemistry is there, and now they have enough research and they have enough film to be like, all right, this is what we did in the first game, that we got to clean up those mistakes, stop Donovan Mitchell, stop Jaylen Brown, stop Jason Tatum, make sure they don't go to the certain spots, and defensively everything will work out because defensively they're gelling well together, especially with OG Anunoby playing the way he's playing. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it works down the line, and we'll see if they grab that dub today. But I will.
Mikal's kind of not to cut you off, but Mikal's
Yes.
kind of like coming to form too. I was like,
Yeah,
gotta shout out our guy Mikal Bridges.
That's another one. That's another one. Everybody wanted to crucify. he's kind of getting things going. I like it because again, you trading 5-6 first round picks for the guy, and it seemed like that we were having a little bit of a question with him, and he's found it, man. The range when he's shooting from three, the way he's able to drive in the basket and defensively, he's picked it up. So I think he'll be fine, especially in the playoffs. But I want to get to the boys, to the Mets, to the squad in Queens, man. I'm excited. Again, we're both of us are diehard Met fans, man. We cover this team like it's in our blood. And I think if I was to ask you in 2020, do you I obviously in 2020, I don't think the rumors came out yet when Steve Cohen had bought the team, but obviously when Steve Cohen bought that team and the first splash that he made was Francisco Lindor, you kind of saw the stuff start to change within itself. I mean, Francisco Lindor, from all the negativity that he's gotten from this fan base and being able to play at an MVP level, put the team on his back, put the organization on his back year in and year out, and people just keep doubting this brother. What have you seen within the Cohen family and what they were able to do culture-wise and what they were able to change to make this organization better than what it was in the previous years?
And I think that, again, everyone wants to come back to the quote that, Cohen's saying the championship window or whatever, however many championship the Mets were going to win in the first 4 or 5 years. All that aside, it's the same thing. Because when I look at it, and I'm not comparing, Lindor and his previous performances in the Cleveland organization to what Julius Randle was doing before, but it's about setting the foundation for your team, right? And that's two foundational guys right there within itself. And obviously Julius Randle is not a part of the Knicks, as Lindor is going to be for the rest of his career as a New York Met, which is fantastic. But yeah, man, it's about building blocks because, again, you talk about basketball, it's a completely different type of sport in baseball in terms of roster construction. When you take a look at the pieces that are necessary to build a championship caliber team, both offensively and on the pitching side of things. So yeah, man, Cohen has shown an extreme motivation, whether that's coming from, his own fan side of things, because he is a fan at the end of the day as well. And so is David Stearns at this point, who's leading this ship for the New York Mets. They are Mets fans as well, and they want to see this franchise and organization and fan base prosper. just like the rest of us. And I think that's the beauty of what's going on right now and who's leading this team in terms of getting the right pieces in here. But again, it's just a willingness. And you talk about, especially recently with the Juan Soto news, right? And what kind of helped outside of the money, because the money's obvious, right? Outside of the money, what helped Juan Soto make that decision of leaving the Yankees to come to the Mets is that you've got, Alex and Steve Cohen, you got this sort of family kind of vibe around this team, right? In Queens. And I don't know, for one reason or another, I guess Juan Soto didn't really feel the same way in the Bronx. So, and again, it's one of those talking points that, yeah, it could sound corny, it could sound cheesy to a lot of fans, but it means something to these players, obviously. So I think that little by little, and I talk about the year 2023 and how abysmal it was, how much of a letdown it was when you add a guy like Justin Verlander and he starts off the season hurt, and you have Max Scherzer, he's always dealing with injuries. And you talk about the money that was allocated to those two aging Hall of Fame pitchers, right? It was disappointing. And the vibes around that team just weren't it, man. I took a look at that team and I was like, every day that they took the field, it did not look inspired. It did not look like they wanted to be out there. It didn't look like they wanted to play for each other. And that was the one thing that I wanted to see from the New York Mets in 2024 and what I didn't see in 2023. And that starts with a guy like Francisco Lindor, like you just said. Francisco Lindor was such a necessary move for this organization, not only with the on-field production. We know what he did in Cleveland. That's never going to be a question, even with the slow starts that he usually gets off to in seasons. The production, what he's going to produce for you over the long haul of 162 should never, ever be in question. But the leadership and what the Mets had in a lack of leadership prior to Francisco Lindor is something that is absolutely irreplaceable, especially at a premier position like shortstop. How many years did the Mets go since Jose Reyes trying to find their shortstop of the future, their franchise cornerstone shortstop? They finally got that. And props to the front office, Steve Cohen, and whoever was involved in that decision at that time in bringing Francisco Lindor on board. And again, that just it's a testament to the type of player and person that Lindor is on and off the field. So I could not be happier just seeing the building blocks. Even though the Mets haven't won a championship in that proposed timeline of Steve Cohen, the building blocks are what's most important. And then you add in a guy that the Mets have always wanted to get into the front office and David Stearns as being the mastermind now running the ship. It's a perfect scenario. I love it.
It's a process, right? You said like building blocks. So you got to go through that process. I know I want to touch on what you said about 2023 because I was there for almost all the games, and you could tell that the vibe wasn't there. That there was really no chemistry. Do you think Buck had a role to play with that? Do you think that there was something with Buck to where it was probably like, they didn't really feel like, I know people talk about, well, if it's Buck, so how come in 2022 it worked? We don't know what happened within the middle of that season to where everything kind of fell apart at the end with the Braves and then going into that walkout. We don't know. But do you think Buck could have played a major role in that, to where when Mendoza came in here, everything kind of came together because he is a Latin coach and he brings some sort of Latin vibe in there?
So I think that it's clear as day that the two managing styles are vastly different in terms of, just the era of Buck Showalter versus Carlos Mendoza. I think the players relating to Carlos Mendoza definitely has helped, especially with him being what he was, a first-year manager. But again, does it have, and trust me, I wanted Buck Showalter gone, more than the rest of everybody else, to be honest with you. I was always on
Yeah.
we need to transition from this Buck era, and I'm thankful for what he did in 2022 with the Mets, winning manager of the year, etc. I'm thankful for that, right? But I don't know if he was the primary reason of things falling apart in 2023, because when you take a look at like everybody in the clubhouse, right? I mean, Pete Alonso 100%, and even Lindor, like he was a very big Buck supporter, which kind of like it surprised me a little bit to see that the clubhouse had Buck Showalter's back like that. But you talk about like the fine tunings of a 162 game season. You talk about the bullpen managing. It seems like Mendoza, for the most part of the year, actually made the right moves, right? In what was happening with the bullpen and that management. But I do think just building a more exciting brand of baseball. And this is something that I wish that Buck Showalter, as much as maybe he didn't want to play into the analytics, I think that he did. And I think that he kind of it was kind of a working game between Buck Showalter and the old school realm of baseball versus the new age analytics. But I think that he did a good job adjusting. But one thing that I would have definitely liked to see Buck Showalter implement a lot more, and what we've seen with Carlos Mendoza, is letting the players be who they are, right? Letting
Facts. Yep.
the personalities out. Because when you
Mhm.
take a look at, and I hate to just make them to be like the standard of this, but the Braves, man, like they have fun, especially in the 2023, 2022, and even 2021. Talk about Acuna, Albies, right? Everybody over there, they have fun playing baseball. And that's something that was lacking for me in 2023. And whether that was the players themselves not really enjoying that season with the way that it was going, or whether it was Buck Showalter not allowing the players to do that, I think it was a little bit of both. That's something that we don't have an issue with now with Carlos Mendoza at the helm. And that's something that I can vastly appreciate. So I think it's a little bit unfair to say that it was a majority of Buck, because I think that quite simple, the players go in between those lines and they are responsible of the play of the team in terms of the success of the team. But I think the differences in managerial styles, there's a lot to be said about why 2024 went so well with, let's face it, maybe a roster come opening day, especially, that really wasn't as talented or maybe on the same level playing field in terms of talent level that the 2023 opening day roster had. And again, I will say, not to be unfair to Buck Showalter, but I'm very happy and thankful that Carlos Mendoza was the manager of the 2024 New York Mets, and now going into 2025. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, no, same. I'm very thankful for the guy. Just again being able to bring some of that Latin experience in and kind of open up, because even guys who aren't Latin in the club, Brandon Nimmo, Jesse Winker, guys like that, Pete Alonso. Well, Pete Alonso's Latin, but you don't really see the Latin side of him.
Yeah,
But being able to for those guys to enjoy that vibe, you didn't really see that with Buck in terms of that. Like that was just it
no, you
was just
didn't.
something different. And compared to what Buck is, Carlos Mendoza is very honest. Like he's very honest. He's very straightforward with the media and letting them know. Like he'll let them know what he wants to know and what he doesn't want them to know. And that's what I kind of love about it. That he's very open. He's very forthcoming with everything.
Yeah.
It's in 2024. Obviously with the whole turnaround with Grimace and everything like that, and us getting to the playoffs and seeing that magical series against the Phillies. Thank God I can't stand Philadelphia. I'm glad it couldn't happen to a worse team. What do you think what do you think those players took for that coming into 2025, especially with getting Juan Soto? Because when they got Juan Soto, that right there, it's like, oh, they're not playing around. They are not playing around. They got the superstar, and it couldn't happen to a nicer team in the Yankees, where he literally said, "I'm gonna go to the other side. I'm gonna take a boat and I'm gonna go to the other side." Because I'm sure he noticed himself, like there's a vibe out there. Like they got something going on that no other organization in the MLB has. Like you got Grimace, you got OMG, like everything is just not even just the way they're playing baseball. Everybody's coming in within the culture as a family. Like they're bringing everybody in, including the fan base. So what do you think they can take from that going into 2025?
I think it's just a taste of what could be in 2025, right? I mean, let's be honest. I can't speak for you, but I can speak for me and the guys that I've done Mets streams with in the past, and that nobody thought, right, that the Mets would make a league championship series in
Yeah, same.
2024,
Yeah,
especially with the way the offseason went. We know Sevy, he overperformed, right? And it was
right.
fantastic to see. Mania did as well. He got rewarded with both of these guys got rewarded with well-deserving contracts for their respective teams now, with Sevy going to the West Coast and the A's organization. But the Mets really did something special. But the thing is that they didn't just overachieve, right? Because I think that that's who the Mets are and who they're going to be. And this is different from what the Giants were in 2022 when they overachieved and we saw what they did the next season, right? They flopped. The
Yeah.
Mets aren't going to do that. And it's partly because of the front office, but also the types of guys that are in this clubhouse, like you just said. Grimace, OMG, all that's awesome. But I think the guys bought in. And let's not forget, we're talking about a team that was 11, 12 games out under
Started 0
500
and
at
5.
that.
Yeah,
Exactly. They started
yeah.
off 0-5. The stadium was empty. It was cold April games. And I think, the first one of the season was thanks to a Pete Alonso home run late
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
game. Was
Mhm,
they
mhm,
didn't even really turn things around because they
mhm.
had an abysmal time up until about mid to late May.
EP, if
But
you remember, we were 37, we were 27, like 36 at the All-Star, like probably by like June, if I'm not mistaken, or All-Star break.
right
One of
beginning
those.
of June, I
Yeah,
think,
beginning of
before they
June, I
started.
think it was. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We were in that
Exactly.
record, and at some point, going into that London series, we were thinking to ourselves like, if the Phillies are about to kill us. So going into that London series where we
Yeah.
won the second game, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the first or second game, where Torres
Second
kind of
game.
got that the second game where we won it in that fashion. Then things started kind of picking up a little bit, but then it was when that grimace first pitch, the ceremonial first pitch happened, where if you would have told me that would have been the spark of everything, I would have been like, yeah, you're joking. And
Yeah.
these guys
I
just found
always
something.
And I always try to like pinpoint what was the turnaround point for the New York Mets. And everybody always says, "Oh, Grimace." Yeah, 100%, because I do think that it's important at the end of the day, right? Like that sort of, I'm gonna say, how would you even say that? That's sort of like the whole Grimace thing, that whole sort of like storyline, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
the players
yeah.
buy into it as well. Maybe they don't. I think they had a really good time with that, especially with OMG as well. But I really do think that second game in London to win in that fashion, like you just said, I think that coming back to the States, that kind of was the starting point for me. And when I look at on-field production, that this team is like, all right, man, we just did that. It's time to go on the run. It's time to stop playing around. And then everything, all the dominoes kind of fell in the perfect manner after that. But again, what do we
That
talk
players
about?
meeting too. Remember after
The
the
players
Dodgers,
meeting
when we
too.
got stung by the Dodgers and Jorge Lopez with the glove, once they had that players meeting, it was like, all right, it's time to wake up right now. Like,
And that's why it's so hard, because there's so many different points of that season that you can kind of like think back to them like, oh, those guys really stepped it up after that point. There's like multiple different points. But the primary factor is that you not only need guys that are talented, right? Because Juan Soto is talented, but you need guys that are going to come in here and buy into the clubhouse, right? Juan Soto is going to do just that. I, we don't know that per se, but I think we could make a strong bet on it, right? With how close he is with Lindor, with everything he said about parts of the reason of why he chose the Mets outside of the money is that the foundational family aspect, and it's beyond Juan Soto, right? It's Jesse Winker, also a guy that came in here immediately, bought into the clubhouse and added on to just the vibes and that mentality, right? That sort of mental toughness. Jose Iglesias, same thing, starting off in the minor leagues, doesn't really get a chance after he performed somewhat well in spring training, right? But Joey Wendell starts off on the team, right? And we know how
yeah,
that went.
yeah.
That's his opportunity, and he does not look back. He was probably the best Mets hitter for a little bit of a portion of that season, and he's exactly what the Mets needed. So, man, I really do think that David Stearns also realizes, just as Leon Rose, because there's a lot of similarities. If you guys are listening to this at home, that we're kind of pointing out between the Mets and the Knicks and the foundation that they're building. Yeah, there's a little bit of different routes to get to the same point that we're at right now, but it's a lot of overlap that we're seeing from both of these front offices and David Stearns and Steve Cohen. And also now, I don't think James Dolan is as involved, but with Leon Rose 100%, that both of these teams are starting to implement, and not only talent but also the guys that actually want to play with each other and for each other is absolutely the same thing. So I'm excited. And the other thing that we didn't mention about Carlos Mendoza, and talking about the advantage that you have from Mendoza as your manager, and we've seen this, and it started off with Luis Averino, if I'm not mistaken, and now it's translated to Clay Holmes. It's
Frankie
translated to
Montas.
Frankie Montas, Desi Drewskill, right, for the assistant pitching coach, is these guys coming over from the other part of town because presumably they have that established relationship with Carlos Mendoza, and he was a part of that organization for quite some time. And that's exactly what we heard. Quite simple. I didn't hear much, personally speaking, in terms of doing my research when Mendoza, right? I didn't really I don't really pay attention to what goes on that side of town, to be honest with you. But one thing that I did continuously hear from all the beat reporters as soon as this signing was official was that Mendoza is well respected in that Yankees clubhouse, right? And he's got a great relationship with all those guys. And now we're adding two and two together with what we're seeing. And David Stern's bringing on these guys from cross side of town is like, that's a real big advantage
Right.
that the Mets now have with free
Right.
agents moving forward.
I'll tell you another person that we didn't get to talk about either, Mark Vientos. Man, what a shift
Yeah.
that kid took. You talk about a guy that under Buck's leadership was going up and down. He played one game, he didn't play the next three. And then all of a sudden, you just didn't see him play at all. I mean, they started the season with Brett Beatty at third base. Brett Beatty was nowhere to be found, couldn't find no consistency. They finally took the balls and said, yo, we're going to send you down and we're going to give Mark Vientos a shot. And he just ran with it. CP, when I tell you that I was so happy for this kid and the performance that he gave in the rest of the season and in the playoffs, I thought this kid was going to go cold in the playoffs. I said he's probably going to have some playoff, pressure and be a little bit nervous, and it's understandable. Nah, he said, no way, Jose. I'm made for the lights. I'm so happy for that kid. Within everything that's going on with the trade rumors, you hear about possibly Alex Bregman coming in and stuff like that. Before I ask you the question, I'll tell you why I don't think a Bregman to me. I mean, again, you add Alex Bregman to this team, that your team is way better than what anybody expected. That's still Alex Bregman at the end of the day. The only reason why I think there's a negative to it is because he's halting one of the positions, whether it's at second base, which he has said that he's willing to play, or at third base. If you don't, the whole Pete thing plays a part. You don't sign Pete, you sign Bregman. Bregman goes to third, Vientos goes to first. You do sign Pete, and then you do sign Bregman. Now you're telling Vientos, yo, you might not be playing the field because we're probably gonna have you play DH. And then if he does play second base, you're telling an Acuna, you're telling a Ronnie, and you're telling a Jeff McNeil, who again most people would prefer to be a utility or leave in a trade. You're telling those three gentlemen, you guys might not be seeing the field every day because Alex Bregman is playing second base. That's the only negative I have with the Alex Bregman. It has nothing to do with, I don't want him because of his bat or because he's 30 years old. No, if he's here, trust me, I'm on board. That's another piece added to us trying to make the World Series. But that you can't deny that there's a factor playing in that somebody's moving back because of his signing. So what do you think about that entire rumor?
Yeah, it's a whole merry-go-round because all of these names are related to each other in terms of the DH, first base, and third base interworkings. You're 100% right about that. And that's why I think that, we're starting to realize that maybe there's an and not an or associated with Bregman and Alonso. Maybe we'll see how the payroll shakes out moving forward. And if the Mets have anything else up their sleeve in terms of the starting pitching front after the Shamanaya re-signing. But what I will say is that if you ask me the question, fit wise, and even just like offensive production, forget defense, because defense, obviously, Bregman's a gold glover and he will make the Mets better by default at third base defensively. But fit wise, and maybe not taking third base away from Vientos, Pete is the clear fit to re-sign and run it back with those guys on the corners, right? And then you get second base, could be a toss-up. I'd like to see Luis Angel Acuna get the shot. I think that, no disrespect to Jeff McNeil, I mean, I really do think that we're seeing a trend at this point with Jeff McNeil. But again, we'll get to him later. At some point this offseason, he's kind of been an afterthought with everything
Yeah,
that's been happening, at least
yeah,
for me. But yeah, I think that Pete Alonso is the better fit. And now the first baseman market, with all these teams addressing their first base needs in the Astros, Nationals, and Yankees. And I'm really surprised that the Yankees signed Goldschmidt as soon as they did, because they would be the perfect fit for Alonso, to be honest with you. But anyways, yeah, I 100% hear you. Um, I will say though, Vientos, I get that a lot of people don't want to move him off of third base. I would be fine with seeing him as a first baseman, but also I don't think that he just seems like a hungry kid to me, right? He seems like he's not phased by a lot. And he wasn't phased by getting the send down recently, right? And then coming back up and just picking up no problem and being one of the Mets' most consistent hitters. So I really do think, again, advanced statistics wise, Vientos did not have a stellar season at third base. He was serviceable more so than we all thought. At least I thought he would be defensively at third base. There's still a lot of fine tuning to do, and he's worked hard working in the offseason with Lindor. That's an absolute given. But I think that he is the type of guy that has the mentality that's like, wherever I am on this team, as long as it's 1 through 9 in the lineup, I don't care. I'm going to hit the baseball and I'm going to put it over the fence. I'm going to drive runners in. I mean, 27 home runs in your first real body of work, right? And not even a full season because he didn't start off on the team, he got sent down, etc. I mean, this guy's a 30 plus home run candidate easily. And when he really catches his full stride, I mean, you could be talking about 35, 40, which is absolutely insane
Yeah,
to think about.
yeah,
So I understand Mets fans unwillingness per se to move Vientos off of third base, but I don't think that would hinder him at all offensively. And if you're
right,
telling me that Pete Alonso is out of the question, which I don't think he is, but if you're telling me that he is, Bregman, like you said, he's Bregman at the end of the day. We know what you're getting defensively. He's been a premier hitter in his career so far. He's entering the prime of his career. He's in the prime of his career. I think that if you move to, Vientos to first base, or you move him to DH and get a stopgap first baseman like Yandy Diaz or somebody like that, I'll take that combination all day long. But I will say, very happy and proud of Mark Vientos as well. That's someone that I admittedly, right, did not know and did not see him being the third baseman for the Mets over the long haul of 2024. I saw him as being the DH, and I was fully on board with him being the DH because I knew his bat had that potential. Defensively, I knew he needed some fine tunings, and you still had Brett Beatty in the mix. So I was just like, we need to see what Brett Beatty has. Why not see what both of these guys have in an
right.
experimental type of year? And Mark Vientos just told me to shut up. He's a third baseman too. So you
Yeah,
know what? I think that the Mets are in a position that no matter what route they go down, whether it's Bregman, whether it's Alonso or somebody else that we're not even talking about right now, I think that with Vientos already being here as a solidified piece and what he's shown us in 2024, any way you shake it up, the Mets are going to be in good shape.
yeah. I'm a big fan of the kid, and I'm proud of what he's done, and I can't wait to see him continue. Do you think that with the Pete Alonso thing, because I know everybody's kind of talking about that he should have taken that 7 year, 150 plus deal that the Mets offered him last year? Now that the market's kind of going slow for him, do you think it's a situation where maybe the Mets could have probably moved on and probably could have gotten a Goldschmidt or a Santana and probably said, you know what, Pete, we just don't think we think you're overdoing it right now. We think you think you're worth than what you are, and that's not the case. Or do you think that there's a possibility where they're trying to be like, Pete, your only option is with us. So let's try to figure this out now, and let's try to get a contract going.
I think it's the latter because you're 100% right. And we've even seen some rumors, right, before Goldschmidt went to the Yankees that the Mets were checking in on him, right? And they could have went down that route, right? They could have went and got a Santana or a Goldschmidt if they really wanted to do that, and if they really thought that that was their plan and that was, a good plan all along and get a rental first baseman, they would have
Mhm.
already done that, right?
Right,
I firmly believe that. So I do think it's the latter in what you said that David Stearns hasn't been lying in what he's been saying to the media. He
right,
hopes that Pete Alonso is a New York Met, and they are in constant communication with Alonso and Boris because they want this deal to get done. I think the parameters they're not agreeing on, and we're seeing why now because there's a little bit of a problem here with what Alonso wants versus what his market actually is. But I do think firmly, and this them foregoing Santana and them foregoing Goldschmidt is that all signs point to them wanting Pete Alonso at the right price. And whether that's a long term deal at the AAV that David Stern sets, or whether that's something where they have to come to a middle ground and do like a 3 year deal, opt out after the first to provide some protection for Pete in terms of maybe getting back out onto the open market to prove himself, but also having that safety blanket to opt into the deal if he flops again. Because I do think it was a flop in 2024 for Pete Alonso standards outside of the
right.
playoff run that
Yeah,
he had,
I
minus
agree.
the
Yeah,
34 home runs. I mean, the runs to
I agree.
scoring position was dreadful. I
Mhm.
think anybody who looks into those numbers can tell you that. And so, but I do think I agree with you. I think that the Mets understand that Pete Alonso should be a part of this lineup and the future outlook for the Mets, but it's not going to come on his or Boris's terms. It's going to come on the Mets' terms.
Last thing that I'll ask you before we wrap up here. Shout out to the 82 that is watching. Appreciate you guys all. Make sure you guys retweet, like it, and subscribe to our YouTube channels. I got see all the CP social medias down in the description. Please give them a follow. The last thing that I'll ask you, CP, is the pitching rotation. Now, you obviously have heard rumors about them possibly making a trade with Seattle for Luis Castillo. Now that we added Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, you got Griffin Canning as a possible guy in the rotation piece. Depending on how they do that, you still have David Peterson, who's due for another good, successful year after last year. Tyler McGill, which makes me want to vomit, but you can't eliminate that you can't eliminate that possibility. And then obviously you got the tribal chief himself, Sean Manaea, back, which made me super happy last night. What do you think they're gonna do in terms of adding rotation? Because even if they do add Pete and now with the Soto thing, they and even if they do add Bregman, that doesn't keep them away from still adding to the rotation. So where do you see them pivoting right now? Because I'll tell you before you answer, I think the smart thing for me, for as far as a fan, I think I would go the Castillo route. He's 32, but he's still throwing like he's still in his 20s, and he's in his mode right now. So if you're not gonna prospect hug and you're not gonna do nothing with these prospects, ask Seattle what they want. And you drop the ball. I wouldn't say drop the ball, but you couldn't get Garrett Crochet here. See what Seattle wants and be like, listen, if Jet Williams, if Acuna, if Ronnie, if they're not going to have any time to play up anytime soon, and you're trying to win right now, you're trying to boost up this rotation. And on top of that, you need an ace. You need if Manaea is not your ace, you need a primary ace. Go see what Seattle wants within Castillo. So what do you think they should do within the rotation?
You're 100% right. I think it's the most likely route for the Mets to take. A lot of Mets fans have pushed back on this, and I think that they are turning a blind eye to this Castillo move because they see the shinier objects, right? In terms of Corbin Burns and Roki Sasaki still out there. And again, I always say hope is not a strategy. It seems like it's more wishful thinking. I'm not saying the Mets, aren't able to go out and get a Corbin Burns if they really wanted to, because they could. If they really wanted to, they could. And same thing with Roki Sasaki, although there's other factors that play with him getting to decide and the international free agent money, etc. But I think the most likely route and the easiest route for the Mets to go ahead and get that ace is Luis Castillo. They have everything at their disposal that the Mariners would want in return to make this deal happen, especially with the Red Sox getting Walker Buehler, them trading for Crochet. They're presumably out. The Phillies added to the rotation, probably the final touch in Jesus Luzardo. They're probably out in terms of the Castillo market. And I've also been kind of surprised with the way that Mets fans have been talking about Luis Castillo. I mean, you mentioned it, 32 years old, but he's got basically a 3-year deal left, right? Worth about I think it's $21.75 million per.
Yeah, I think his first 2 years he'll be getting 24, and then his last year in 2028 he'll get 25, and then he'll be a free agent in 29.
So there you go. And then you have that vesting option too that I think it's attached in the back end as a potential fourth year. But whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, he's 32 years old. You'll have him for 3 years. Worst case, he hits the vesting option. You'll have him for the 4th year, right? Okay, whatever. You just signed a 32-year-old Sean Manaea to a 3-year deal as well. So if age is the concern, the people who are celebrating Manaea and booing this idea of Castillo, I'm like,
makes no sense, right?
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right,
So,
exactly.
and let alone the fact that Castillo really has a solidified body of work back in a Cincinnati Reds uniform, and also, right, the first couple of seasons as a Mariner. I mean, are we really going to discredit, even though to his standards, he had a little bit of a down year in 2024 to his standards? I mean, this guy was an all-star in 2023. I mean, again, you could take a look at the finer statistics of it, but he still performed pretty well, and he's getting a little overshadowed by some of the other names in that rotation. I mean, the Gilberts, the Logan Gilberts, the George Kirby's, etc. I mean, there's a handful of guys in that rotation, which I think is also feeding into the fact that the Mariners are going to be more likely to deal Castillo because they got those guys and they need
Right.
the offensive help or the prospect capital, depending on what they're actually going to ask for. Everyone outside of Mark Vientos, I hope Buster Only hears this podcast because Buster Only is spewing some nonsense over there about Mark Vientos versus Castillo.
If I
Anyways,
could give you
I don't
my
listen to
opinion
what
on
I,
Buster Only, off camera, you'll know how I feel about that brother. That's another one.
it's yeah, he's a lost cause. I agree with that
Yeah.
100%. But yeah, man, I really do think I'm not one to discredit what Castillo has done. Yes, he's aging. I get it. You know, this isn't technically the prime of his career. But if you're telling me that we can go into 2025 and beyond with the rotation of Castillo, Senga, Manaya, and hopefully a David Peterson to the same form that he produced in 2024, adding on Frankie Montas, who is still a wild card, but if what David Stearns has said about Montas is correct and that he has some of the best stuff that we've seen around the league, and maybe some of the, injury concerns or whatever, the consistency has been a problem. As your number 5, yeah, I'm gonna sign up for that all day long. And I will say this in terms of the timeline, because I was just having this discussion on my channel on the Mets Hot Stove Lives that we do in relation to these 3 guys that Mets fans are talking about: Castillo, Sasaki, and Burns. If the Mets, let's say the Mariners trade Castillo sooner than Burns or Sasaki sign, I mean, that's a really big risk that you're taking in terms of potentially missing out on all 3 at the
Right.
end of the day. And
Right.
maybe the Mets are forced to fork up that money for Burns,
Right.
whereas they wouldn't have done so otherwise. And if you're really trying to sell me on the Mets forcing decisions, that doesn't seem to be up the realm of what David Stearns has been doing so far as president of baseball operations. So I think that logically, performance wise, and fit wise, with what the Mets have going on right now and the way that the rest of the market is, I think that Luis Castillo is a pretty good bet. Obviously, there's other trade candidates out there. I mean, talking about Pablo Lopez, I would take him. I think he's pretty good. I think Luis Castillo is better, obviously, but I take Pablo Lopez. Dylan Cease is out there, but I don't see the Padres dealing with the Mets and another, top NL competitor. Will they have some playoff and World Series aspirations themselves? I agree with you. All this to say, I do agree that if I was to go down the route as acting GM and president of baseball operations myself, I think Luis Castillo is the safest bet.
It's number 1 on my list. Yep. Well, shout out to the 84 in here, man. I appreciate everybody watching, man. This has been fun. Thank you, CP, so much, man. This is dope. I can't wait to do another one with you for sure. I'm gonna have you on again. Please follow CP. I got all his social media down in the description, man. He does awesome fucking work, takes the time to give a lot of people great content, man. So please give him a shout out. Please give him a follow, man. I appreciate you, CP, so much. That is another live from Top Bunk Sports. We will see you on the next video. Peace out.